Her white luxury SUV sat bold as brass in the middle of my driveway, like it belonged there. It was parked at an angle that completely blocked access to my boat trailer, a detail that probably wouldn't have mattered to anyone except someone like me, who had plans to be on the lake before the heat rolled in. I walked up to my own front door and found it locked, silent, and taped with a laminated flyer from the Pine Ridge HOA. It read, "Community Access Evaluation in Progress." That was the moment I decided I wasn't playing their game. I locked the gate behind her Escalade, turned off my phone, and went fishing for 3 straight days. By the time I returned, the sun had done its work. Patricia Lawson was red as a boiled lobster, dehydrated, and halfway through trying to break into my tackle shed with what looked like a nail file. She didn't look up when I pulled in, too focused on her makeshift burglary attempt. I didn't say a word. I just watched for a minute, quietly taking in the absurdity. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm a simple man with simple priorities, catching bass and being left the hell alone. 6 months back, I inherited my grandfather's fishing cabin on Silver Lake. It's a quiet slice of paradise, 12 acres of tall pine trees and silence, a gravel access road that eats suspension systems for breakfast, and a cabin that's seen more sunsets than most people ever will. The nearest neighbor is a family of raccoons that respect personal space better than most suburbanites. That's where Patricia comes in. Patricia Lawson, queen of the Pine Ridge Estates HOA, a woman with perfect blonde hair that somehow never frizzed no matter the humidity. She wore high-end athleisure like it was a business uniform and carried a clipboard like it was a sword. The woman had a gift for passive-aggressive domination and a firm belief that her suburban fiefdom extended well beyond its gates. It started with notes. Handwritten, printed, laminated, even scented once. Things like, reminder, all properties adjacent to Pine Ridge must maintain grass height under 2 inches. I laughed the first time. Crumpled it and used it to light my morning fire. My land isn't adjacent to anything but wilderness, and it sure as hell doesn't fall under any HOA jurisdiction. But the letters didn't stop. Mailbox not in compliance with aesthetic standards. Boat must be pre-approved by HOA Architectural Committee. Outdoor grills require board permitting. Each one went straight into the fire pit like ceremonial kindling. And then she started showing up in person. One morning I found her standing on my dock with a tape measure, taking notes at 7 a.m. like she was auditing a federal project. "This dock extends 3 feet beyond acceptable recreational structure limits," she announced like she was reading me my rights. "Lady," I said, gripping my coffee like a stress ball, "this is my property. Not yours. You don't get to enforce anything here." But Patricia wasn't the kind of woman who understood concepts like property lines or civil trespass. She believed the world outside Pine Ridge was simply unclaimed territory that hadn't been brought into compliance yet. She began calling my land the Lakefront Annex in her HOA newsletters, which I only knew about because she kept stuffing them into my mailbox like some kind of bureaucratic stalker. Then came the escalation. I came back from a weekend trip and found she'd installed a Pine Ridge Estates advisory sign at the end of my driveway. Not nearby, on my property. I yanked it out and tossed it in the lake. Made a great fish attractor, actually. After that, she went full scorched earth. Filed county complaints about imaginary code violations. Sent cease and desist letters typed on law firm letterhead I suspect belonged to her brother-in-law. Organized lake patrols, with Pine Ridge residents slowly cruising past my dock, snapping photos and muttering about illegal modifications. But the morning she parked that Escalade in my driveway was the final straw. I'd planned to hit the water early before the heat set in, but there it was, her SUV parked like a territorial marker, engine off, doors locked, not a soul in sight. I paced the perimeter like a man inspecting a crime scene. Found her tote bag on my porch swing. Her HOA visor hanging from my garden hose. A line of orthopedic shoe prints in the dirt leading toward the dock. And there, taped to my door, yet another one of those damn notices. Community Access Evaluation in Progress. I finally found her inside my boathouse, snapping photos of wooden beams and muttering about structural deficiencies, like she was prepping an episode of HGTV, Tyrant Edition. She didn't even look at me. Just scribbled away with a laser pointer and a fancy camera. "Get out," I said, 2 syllables, dead calm. She didn't flinch. "This inspection will only take another hour," she replied. "Then I'll be evaluating your septic system." That's when I saw she'd already set up a folding table covered in pre-filled violation forms, my name, my property, all printed and ready to go. I could have called the cops. Should have, maybe. But sometimes, people like Patricia don't learn from citations or warnings. They need a more hands-on education. So I turned and walked calmly back to my driveway. The Escalade still sat there, arrogant as ever. I didn't need her keys. I had something better, a steel gate at the edge of my property, an old relic from my grandfather's Cold War paranoia. 12 feet tall, solid as a bank vault. I hadn't locked it in years. But I did that day. Hit the code, heard the satisfying clang, and pulled the manual override. That gate wasn't opening without a welding torch. Then I loaded up my truck, conveniently parked outside the gate, grabbed my fishing gear, and headed over to my buddy's cabin for a peaceful weekend on the lake. Left her inside her own mess, trapped, sunburned, and stewing in the consequences of trespassing against a man who just wanted to be left the hell alone. I turned off my phone before I even hit the main road. I didn't want to hear a single voicemail, text, or SOS from Patricia Lawson. Whatever tantrum she was about to throw after finding herself locked on my property was her problem, not mine. This was her crash course in respecting boundaries, and class was in session until I decided fishing was no longer fun. I headed across the lake to my buddy Tom's cabin. Tom's got cold beer, a pontoon boat with a working motor, and the good sense not to ask too many questions. For 3 days, we fished the cool northern edge of Silver Lake. The bass were biting, the skies were clear, and somewhere across the water, the self-appointed queen of the HOA was learning that playing dictator on someone else's land doesn't end well. The first day was bliss. I caught 3 big bass before noon, grilled steaks on Tom's deck, and fell asleep in the guest room with a belly full of beer and zero stress. Day 2, Tom mentioned he'd seen someone waving from my dock through binoculars. Could have been a tourist, I told him. We decided to fish farther upriver just to be safe. By day 3, even Tom was curious. Smoke signals, he called them, except it wasn't smoke. It was a white bedsheet flapping from my boathouse, hung up like a low-budget SOS. 3 days felt like enough. I asked Tom to drop me off at the public launch near my place, then hiked through the woods so I could approach from the back trail. I wanted to see what 3 days of her own behavior looked like reflected back at her. What I found was a scene straight out of a survivalist drama. The Escalade's windows were fogged with condensation from her sleeping inside. My garden hose had been uncoiled and dragged to the car like a lifeline. Empty water jugs and food wrappers from my dock's emergency stash littered the yard like a hurricane had passed through. Patricia herself looked like a woman who'd lost a fight with the wilderness. Her once flawless blonde hair stood out in frizzy, wind-tangled tufts. Her pricey athleisure wear was stained and wrinkled, her sneakers coated in lake mud. She sat on my porch steps muttering under her breath and scribbling furiously on Pine Ridge Estate's letterhead, what I can only assume were either frantic notes or the beginnings of her memoirs. The moment she saw me emerge from the trees, she jumped up with unexpected energy for someone who'd spent 3 nights surviving on beef jerky and citronella candles. "You're in so much trouble," she rasped, her voice hoarse from yelling at passing boats that never stopped. "False imprisonment. Kidnapping. Intentional emotional distress." I pulled out my phone and powered it on for the first time in days. The screen lit up with a storm of missed calls. Several from unknown numbers. A handful from the sheriff's department. And around 30 from Patricia's husband. As she continued shouting legal threats at me, I started playing through the voicemails. Her husband's messages ranged from concern to panic to furious. The sheriff's office had been trying to reach me too, about a trespassing complaint I'd filed months ago. Apparently, it had finally made its way through the system. Funny timing, I said, finally looking at her. Turns out, you've got a bit of a history when it comes to ignoring property lines. I was trapped, she shouted, pointing to the closed gate. Cruel and unusual punishment. This violates the Geneva Convention. I calmly gestured toward the clearly marked pedestrian exit. The gate locks from both sides. Manual release was right there. You could have walked out any time. The only thing keeping you here was your refusal to leave your precious Escalade behind. Her jaw dropped. The realization hit her all at once: 3 days of rationing granola bars, sleeping in a car, signaling passing boats with bed sheets, and she could have left with a 50-yard walk. I called the sheriff's office. Deputy Martinez arrived in less than 30 minutes. When he stepped out of his cruiser and saw Patricia, he sighed like a man who'd been dragged into this circus one too many times. "Ma'am," he said, "you're on private property. Again. That's criminal trespass." Patricia tried her usual deflections, claimed she had implied consent through her HOA duties. She pulled out a hand-drawn map that looked like a rejected elementary school project and pointed to my land labeled Lakefront Annex. The deputy wasn't impressed. He asked if Pine Ridge Estates had any formal jurisdiction over land outside their subdivision. The silence was louder than any argument she could have made. While she stumbled through vague references to community cohesion, Deputy Martinez called for a tow truck. Her SUV had left deep ruts in my gravel, broken a sprinkler head, and was leaking oil onto my clean driveway. That added property damage to her list of violations. The deputy began writing citations while the tow truck driver hooked her Escalade up. Every fine he listed made her turn a deeper shade of purple. In the end, she was hit with criminal trespass charges, multiple counts. Property damage. Theft of emergency supplies. Harassment, backed by a fat file of documented incidents. Deputy Martinez said the prosecutor would likely pursue it hard, given her pattern of behavior. Thousands in fines, restitution, and potential jail time if she ever came back near my property again. But that wasn't the best part. The very next day, the Pine Ridge Estates HOA called an emergency board meeting. Turns out, I wasn't the first person she'd harassed, just the last straw. The vote to remove her as HOA president? Unanimous. Every board member voted her out. Even her husband abstained. The aftermath wasn't cheap. County fines, $12,000. Repairs to my property, another $5,000. Her lawyer fees for a case she eventually pled guilty to. Likely double that. But the real win? Watching Patricia Lawson realize she'd lost everything, all because she refused to respect a simple, clearly marked property line. And that, my friends, was worth every one of those 3 peaceful days on the lake.